Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is another edition, a special edition of TNC Talks Nonprofit. I'm Scott.
I'm Mercedes.
And today we have a very special guest with us who the Nonprofit Council brought in a couple of years in a row back in I think it was 2012, 2013, to speak on his journey with writing 2 books, talking about nonprofit overhead. We'd like to welcome Dan Pallotta as our guest. It's good to see you after all these years, Dan.
You too, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I think what, kind of gave us the decision to bring you on in our podcast, it was twofold. You've been doing some really cool things as we followed you over the years. Your past 2 books, getting into the music space. But another thing is we have been meeting with, elected officials here locally on, budget issues and nonprofit funding. And we've begun to hear the overhead myth creep back into the discussions. It really seemed to not go away, but it was less of an issue and less prevalent. I mean, even funders were talking, and most funders locally here are still talking about investing in people to run the programs and whatnot. But I would love for you to tell us your story about how you wrote Uncharitable and then Charity Case and how all that transpired and your mission to really address this issue.
Yeah, sure. Well, the book Uncharitable came out of my experience in creating the breast cancer 3-day walks and the AIDS rides and the Out of the Darkness suicide prevention events. And those came out of a cross-country bike ride that I organized in college when I was a senior. And all of that came out of a fascination with the impossible and how impossible things are actually achieved. I was 8 when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. I was very interested in the Apollo program at a young age, and watched every Gemini mission and Apollo mission, all of the boring black and white television images where nothing would happen for an hour and a half. You're just looking at 2 lines, and eventually you would see Neil Armstrong walking on the moon in 1969. And I think that's it's still what I'm interested in today. How did they build the Sydney Opera House? How did they make that happen when they had no idea how to engineer or construct those shells? How did they get those kids out of the underwater cave in Thailand? How did Walt Disney make Disneyland happen? How did Muhammad Ali beat George Foreman? How did we run a 4-minute mile? Because the social problems that the world confronts have been with us as long as there has been humanity, and we have been perplexed and unable to eradicate them. So they fall into the category of impossible. It's impossible to solve these problems. So I've always felt that if you want to end hunger, it's much more important to study how impossible things are achieved than it is to understand the dynamics of hunger and world poverty and population. Yes, you should have a knowledge of all of that. But if you don't have a subject matter expertise in possibility, you'll never eradicate it. If you want to bring the suicide rate down to 0. It's great to know about mental health, but that's an impossible task. And so if you haven't studied anything about how people have achieved the impossible, then it'll always be with us. And that remains my interest to this day, which is why I think people find it strange. Well, Dan Pallotta, you're like this nonprofit guy. Well, how could you possibly be a champion of Elon Musk? How could you possibly be a champion of Steve Jobs and these big corporations? Because they're doing impossible things. And we're not. We are absolutely not. And if anybody deserves impossible achievement, it's the least among us. So we do a great disservice to them when we turn our noses up at people who are achieving impossible things and we refuse to learn from them.
Well, that's a really interesting perspective. I mean, it sounds more like a curiosity that's always there, trying to learn from
Always been
others.
there. Always been there. Like formative for me. Apollo was formative for me. And on the bicentennial in 1976, my parents, were working class, a construction worker dad, and my mom was a full-time mom. It had been their dream since the day they sat on their porch after they got married. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have kids and take them to Disneyland someday? That just wasn't something that was done if you lived in the suburbs of Boston, where you went to New Hampshire for vacation or maybe down to the Cape. And they saved up their money, and we went and saw, the West, and we saw Yosemite, and we saw Las Vegas, and we saw San Francisco and LA and Disneyland. And that was formative for me, that out of someone's imagination, this world lived in Walt Disney's head, and he manifested it in the external world. My daughter is a huge fan of Ralph Lauren because he manifested a world that was in his head externally. And I look at our political climate today, and it's always fight. We have to fight this. We have to fight that. We have to fight this. Where are the dreams? Where is the vision of what the country should look like, could look like? Like Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, said that most people's resentments in life come from the fact that they were never willing to state what they really wanted. They never really said it. And so they resent everybody who ever did. And I found in the nonprofit sector, that's true in the for-profit sector as well. It's a human issue, but it's particularly acute in the nonprofit sector. We will not state our dreams. We're so out of touch with them that even in an exercise like we used to do in the bold training, people are unable to articulate them. What do you really want? Like, if you really like that little gift shop stone, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? You would bring the suicide rate to 0, right? You would end homelessness completely, right? But nobody will say that. They're afraid to say it. They're embarrassed to say it. It feels, I don't know, like hubris. The words won't come out of their mouth. So in the bold training, when we used to do a possibility exercise at the end of the day, and I would tell people, this is just an exercise. I want you to flex this muscle. I want you to say what problem you want to solve and by when. So it could be, we want to, end homelessness on the streets of Boston by 2030. We want to end child hunger in this county by 2030. All right, that's the exercise. All right, go sit at your table, do it. And someone, and then the chairperson for the table will stand up and, okay, what's your table's answer? All right, well, here's what they would say. But before we get into that, I have to tell you about our history. We have a board, like, first of all, we own a bill, it just would, degenerate into this story, and you never get any possibility out of them. Or you'd get something like
that.
Remember? Yeah.
I was in. Denise and I were in one of your trainings in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
You get something like, we want to build a second building. Really? Okay, I get that that's great, but that's it? Really? Like, that's it? That's as big as you can state it? You don't have to do it. It's just us here, and it's a secret right now. Just say it. Just say it.
Just say it out loud.
Can't say it.
Yeah,
Can't say it. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is saying, I want to go to Mars. I want to make humanity a multiplanetary species. Jesus, excuse my language, it's a hell of a lot easier to say I want to end hunger in Phoenix than it is to say I want to make humanity a multiplanetary species. But we can't say it. We won't say it.
And why do you think that is in this sector space?
Look, that's a big conversation, and I've been thinking about that lately, and I've never written about the psychopathology of what brings a person into the nonprofit sector. Is there a thread that runs through everybody? Now certainly, we all want to make the world a better place, and there's a compassion, definitely. But I can only share my own experience, and I went to Harvard, graduated cum laude, majored in economics, but I was figuring out at Harvard that I was gay. So I felt disconnected from that community. I wasn't making the connections and all the finals clubs that everybody else was that was going to bring them into this, this kid's father's business or, this opportunity. Disconnected from all of that. Left with the feeling of, well, what am I worth? Who am I? What can I do? They're all going to business school. They're going to make gobs of money. They're going to do all these things. And, Werner Erhard had created the Hunger Project, which was daring and exciting, the end of hunger by the year 2000. I'd never heard anybody state it like that. And that did legitimately inspire me. And so I organized this cross-country bike ride. And then I moved to Los Angeles. And I really had an inferiority complex, I think, because of being gay. And also because of being Italian, believe it or not, because you faced a lot of, not necessarily discrimination in my generation. In my father's generation, you did, certainly in my grandfather's, but a lot of ridicule and Italian jokes that made you feel self-conscious, and like I'm dirty or I'm stupid. And I, some people are surprised to hear me say this, but I never felt particularly bright, like I graduated 14th in my high school class of 514, but I would always look at the 13 ahead of me and say, I'm not particularly bright. So that combination of shame around being gay, shame about being Italian, not feeling particularly bright, well, what could I possibly do with my life? Well, I could go work for a nonprofit. When I look back and I think about that, like, holy shit, that's deep. That's deep. Like it was your only like you thought they were the only people who would take you. So yeah, you were interested in helping others. That was there, but it wasn't primary. It was this self-loathing that was primary. Well, how much of that exists in the nonprofit sector? For how many of us was it a safe place where I didn't have to take a risk in business or take a risk at something where I might fail with people who were smarter than me and more accomplished than me? I think those are questions we have to ask ourselves,
It's interesting.
That's interesting.
But do you think a lot of it is centered around...
I was thinking more like scarcity mindset,
Yeah.
I think when you work in the nonprofit sector.
Definitely, that's huge, yeah. And oppression sickness, which being gay, you saw what that is, where you eat your own because nobody should be getting ahead because we're all bad people. And so it's literally the no sector, right? It's no. Like that famous expression, the nonprofit sector doesn't know how to take yes for an answer. If somebody says, yeah, I'll give you that money, and they say, well, are you sure? Like you don't have to give all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so interesting.
So when you wrote the first book, Uncharitable, or it was Charity Case, correct?
No, Uncharitable came first. Yeah.
What drove you? I guess, to me, I looked at that as it was a lot of you and kind of your story of what happened to you and your company by trying to, have a for-profit that's really out there raising money for these charities, and then you get dinged for that because of your expense.
Dinged is putting it mildly. That was a total. That car got totaled. So for those that are listening that don't know, so I created the AIDS Rides, I created the Breast Cancer 3 Days, created the Out of the Darkness suicide prevention events. We raised almost $600 million in 9 years. It was more money raised more quickly for those causes than any events in history. We were the subject of one of the very first Harvard Business School case studies on social enterprise. We were a for-profit company.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the AIDS Rides came after a lot of therapy, psychotherapy, and a lot of 12-step work. And the beginning of a sense that I deserve to fulfill my dreams, not only my dreams for the world, but my own economic dreams, and that those two things can live together. And there's interest, it's all Jungian. I mean, to me, our lives, our world, it's all Jungian. So if I look back, I look at my dad and my grandfather. My grandfather came over here from Italy. He was entrepreneurial. He was a bull in a china shop. He was very aggressive. He could be brutal. He built homes. He built a company for himself. My dad lived in his shadow, emotional abuse there. I was loyal to my dad's personality, but I also looked up to my grandfather. I'm caught in the middle. And if you think about that, a for-profit company for raising money for charities mirrors that perfectly, right? Because the for-profit construct is your grandfather wanting to do well and build something that has your name on it, and the nonprofit side is your solidarity with those who are less than. So there you see it reflected once again. Anyway, so we had all this success, and then we went out of business in large part because of gathering criticism about our, whatever it was, 40% overhead on average, up against all that money that we had raised, salaries that were $200,000, $300,000. At one point, I think mine was $360,000, like outrage over all of that. Meanwhile, yeah, but $600 million. Yeah, but more money going to AIDS and breast cancer than ever before, and it's unrestricted. Yeah, but you made $360,000. So what the fuck if I did? We raised $600 million, and it ain't that much money. Look at how much money people are making who work for Coca-Cola. Jesus. So anyway, I'm watching all this unfold and happen to me, and I started to catalog it at some point in my head, like, oh, this overhead thing is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Initially, it's ridiculous because they're just focusing on the percentage and not the actual dollar amount. Right. So, you got a lemonade stand that operates 100% goes to charity, but it only raises $9. And over here, 60% goes to charity, but it raises $900 million. You might want to pay attention to that number rather than the percentage. That was the first thing. And then second, what does the percentage, in terms of the actual nonprofit, have anything to do with whether they're doing any good or not? It doesn't tell you a damn thing about whether. So
yeah,
I started to write. Well, after we went out of business, we sued Avon, the cosmetics company, for stealing the breast cancer 3-day concept. And it was a long arbitration. We prevailed. They were. It was found that they had illegally appropriated the breast cancer 3-day concept. And I was writing a book during all of this about overhead. And my lawyer said, you are not putting out a book in the middle of this trial because it'll be part of discovery, and then we'll have to answer all kinds of questions about that. So I was bummed because I had a publisher for it. So a few years went by. We won the case. It was a 96 days of hearing, I think it was. 22,000 page record. Avon spent something like $14 million in attorney's fees. And we ultimately prevailed. And then, what was it that, oh yeah. So I'm shopping this book around about overhead, and I have an agent, and she says, I want to know what underlies the overhead issue. It's too superficial. What's underneath that? I'm like, Jesus. Well, that's a much deeper conversation. So I spent 2 more years on what's underneath that. And what's underneath that are these prohibitions on salaries, prohibition on taking risk, prohibition on marketing, prohibition on taking more than 12 months to do anything, and no capital market. So those 5 pillars became the meat of the book Uncharitable. So I gave her that book, and she goes, where did this all come from? I'm like, oh, Jesus. Now I got to spend another 6 months researching the early Puritan settlers to New England, which is where these ideas originally came from. And so thank God for Stephanie Cade, my agent, challenging me in those ways to keep writing and digging deeper, because
He was curious too.
yeah, it became a much more important and legitimate piece of work that looked at the holistic dysfunction rather than the symptom on the surface of the overhead ratio, because the overhead ratio ultimately polices these deeper things. Did you pay someone too much? Did you take a risk? Are you spending money on marketing? So anyway, that's a long-winded answer for how the book Uncharitable came to be. And then I started, it was published in 2009, I think. And I had been going to TED. I went in 2006 and 2007, and I really wanted to do a TED Talk on it. But I thought that the best way not to get a TED Talk was to ask for it. So I didn't ask. I just waited for them to ask me. And I got tired of that. And in 2012, I emailed Chris Anderson, who runs TED. I had met him, and I said, hey, I'd like to do a TED Talk on my book. And he said, yeah, we'd love to have you. 18 minutes, done. Come, do it. And that exploded that message. And then I wrote Charity Case, which was, okay, what do we do about this as a sector? And then like 3 years ago now, we made a movie based on the book Uncharitable that's available everywhere, iTunes, Amazon Prime. If you go to uncharitablemovie.com, all the links are there for how to watch it, whether you live in the U.S. or elsewhere. And I don't know, gave something, a little over 500 speeches on the subject all over the world in those intervening years.
Including San Antonio.
Including San Antonio twice, I think, right?
2 years in a row.
Yeah, 2 years in a row. Thanks for having me there, Scott. Beautiful city.
Yeah. So since that time, and since we've had this, kind of break with you, what have you been doing in the music space, and what led you to that particular path? Is it something you've always wanted to do?
Yeah, I've always loved music. I was a huge John Denver fan. When everybody else was listening to Zeppelin and Jethro Tull, I was listening to John Denver and that beautiful acoustic guitar and that beautiful tenor voice, which I always wished I had. I always said, if I get reincarnated, I want a tenor voice and straight blonde hair. So I used to play clubs in high school and college. I'd do 4 sets from 8 to midnight doing cover songs, and was writing some of my own music. And I think when I started realizing I was gay, I had dreamed of being president of the United States. That's what I wanted to do. And it felt like that was no longer in the cards in 1983. There were no out politicians. There was no gay marriage, anything like that. So I figured, well, I'll move to LA and try to get a record deal. And I tended to write long songs because with a lot of my political ideas in these songs, And I got to audition for Clive Davis. I went over to the Beverly Hills Hotel. I'll never forget it. He would stay in the bungalows, go past these beautiful night blooming jasmine trees. You could smell all the beautiful blossoms, and beautifully manicured, and these adobe pink little bungalows with slate roofs, and there was a living room with drapes and a fireplace and a kitchen. And I'd only ever been in a Holiday Inn with a coffee maker. This was like crazy to me, And there's Clive Davis, and I played him a song I wrote called American Pictures, and he doesn't pull any punches. He said, "This is exceptional writing. Let me listen to the rest of the stuff. I'm going to Palm Springs. I'll get back to you next week." And I thought my life had changed, because this is the guy who said yes to John Hammond signing Bruce Springsteen, Dylan, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Janis Joplin, I mean, you name it, and then later Whitney Houston, Barry Manilow, and all these people. And he did get back to me, and he said, the era of Don McLean is over, and that's kind of what you're writing, so there's nothing I can break you here with. So I would continue to play him demos over the years, and we became very, very, very close friends. And, he's like family now, and he takes my kids out to buy a toy whenever we go visit in New York, and we stay at his place. And it was so funny because he asked me to give a toast at his 90th birthday 4 years ago. And right an hour before I went on, he said, "I got news for you." I said, "What?" He said, "Bruce Springsteen's going to follow you." I said, "Really? Are you crazy?"
Wow.
But then at the last minute, Bruce Springsteen had to phone it in from New Jersey on video. So I was disappointed. But just 5 weeks ago, we went to see Springsteen together in Newark, New Jersey. And it was so wild to see Bruce, doing this to him. And there's a woman, I'm taking a picture of Clive in the back of Clive's head, and you can't see Bruce, but there's a woman holding up a phone right next to Clive, and you can see Bruce performing in the phone right next to his head. And I think, man, the history between those two, 50 years of history, and he made his career possible. So anyway, I'm going way off on a tangent, but so I always loved music. I never got a record deal. Edgar Winter recorded a song that I wrote for a B horror movie. But then about 6 years ago, I decided to start writing again, and just found that at the age of, at the time, 58, 59, now I'm 65, I just had a lot more to say than I ever did in my 20s. What's remarkable about a Bob Dylan or a Joni Mitchell or a Bruce Springsteen is their authenticity. They're speaking the truth of the difficulty of their lives. And when I was 21, I was hiding my life, so I could not possibly have written anything authentic about myself, But now, at the age of 65, I can, and so I write a lot. I perform a lot, and I'm on the second floor of an old blacksmith shop in Topsfield, Massachusetts. And the first floor is a performance space we have called Good Folk, and we do 3 shows a month there, 40 seats. We sell them out every night. We get great folk artists from all over the country, and it's small.
Yeah.
And I'm used to big, I'm used to these idolizing big things, impossible things. And I think there's a place for that. There's also paradoxically a place for the small, and people come here and they love it. They don't look at their phones for 90 minutes. They enjoy the vulnerability of a beautiful musician telling their story. It makes us all feel connected and human again. So it's an interesting thing. I think had the world never decided to go big, had we decided neighbors would take care of neighbors, we would do everything in our own communities, I don't think we'd have the mess that we have now, which cannot now be solved. Well, it could be solved neighbor to neighbor, but you need a spiritual revolution, the likes of Jesus returning. In the absence of that, you need to start to do big logistical things on I don't want to say centralized, but a much more strategic, national, global level,
I would agree. So
Yeah.
what's next? I mean, are you going to continue writing and performing? And do you have any other?
Yeah, I am. We just put out a new album 2 weeks ago that I had wanted to do as my third album in the last 4 years, my fourth album, excuse me. And I wanted to record an album entirely on iPhone. So that's what this one is. It's called Children and Ghosts. I recorded it in 2 days in my bedroom without any of the fancy equipment that I usually use for recording. And now I have a new batch of songs that I'm going to start recording with a friend of mine who lives in Italy that I met in LA when he used to play for Melissa Etheridge. I also don't want to completely abandon the body of work that I've developed in philanthropy. So I'm working on a new book right now that I hope will come out this fall. It's called Misgivings, the gigantic mistake big philanthropy makes. And it's very simple. It's not rocket science. It's a call to action to family offices, big money, foundations, to stop giving your money to charitable programs, stop giving it to capacity building, give it exclusively to well-developed and vetted fundraising and growth plans. That's the only way the sector is going to scale to solve problems of this magnitude. Stop giving your money to programs. I mean, it's heretical,
Wow. And have you wrapped the book? It's going to be published this fall, or are you still finishing?
I'm still polishing it up, but I should have it done by the end of the summer, and I think we'll have it out late this fall. We should be able to do that.
Is there going to be a circuit tour for you speaking about it?
Possibly a video circuit tour. I do a lot of stuff by video. It's expensive to have me come personally.
Yeah.
I really hate airplanes now, having been on so many planes for so many years. I get nauseous just thinking about it. So, just to be transparent, if somebody's willing to pay me a boatload of money, yeah, I'll come in person. But otherwise, it's
that would be a no for us. But
yeah.
But
otherwise,
potentially having you streamed in video.
It works really well. The video nature of it disappears in about 2 minutes, and you're just there with the message, so.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you spending time with us. I mean, again, it's great to see you doing so well and transitioning into another part of your life. But I'm glad that you're following it up with another book, because I can't wait to read that.
I'm very excited to read that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sort of like The Everyday Philanthropist, which I wrote maybe, 4 or 5 years ago. And The Everyday Philanthropist was a distilled version of Uncharitable, a 1-hour read you could put in your pocket, 33 micro chapters. And I wanted something that you could give to your dentist or bank teller or your mother, your grandmother, that make it easier. And this Misgivings is going to be similar. I think a lot of times when you write a book, you feel like it needs to be this thick to be taken seriously. And nobody wants to even read novels that thick anymore, let alone a book on the economics of charity. So it's about a 1-hour read, like 50 tiny little chapters, repetitive and written in kindergarten-ish language, so that you can't finish it.
People don't read anymore.
As people don't read, and even when they read,
they're not paying attention.
They're reading something other than what you wrote. They're interpreting it in some other way. And I remember when I wrote Uncharitable, I would tell people specifically what this is about. This is about stop asking about overhead, start asking about results, stop asking about salaries. That's what my book is about. At cocktail parties, I would tell people, and they'd say, I'm so glad somebody is writing a book like that, finally, because the money never gets to the people who need it. Like, did you listen to a word I just said about what this book is? It's about the opposite of that. So anyway, this book is written such that you cannot mistake what I am saying.
It's also nice to have those books that you can pick up and put down easily with the little micro chapters. I tend to like that style.
Yeah, this one you can pick up and put down and be done with it when you put it down.
It's done. Read.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, thanks again.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you joining us. Good to see you. And who knows, maybe in the next few months.
We'll have to go to his music venue because it sounds pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll be up in Portland, Maine in Labor Day weekend, so you never know.
Awesome. Portland's wonderful. Yeah, great. Well, good to see you, Scott. Nice to meet you, Mercedes. And I wish you well. I'm glad you're doing well, too, Scott. And I'm glad you're sticking with it.
Thanks. Well, for the next few months anyway. So.
All right.
Thank you very, very much, Dan.
Take care now. Bye.
I'm excited to share with you some news that our podcast is now available to watch exclusively on Roku and Amazon Fire. Check it out on the Nonprofit Network.